In 2001, a small-town girl was getting ready for the biggest night of her teenage life. She left school early, excited. But by nightfall, something felt wrong. She never came home. And for 20 years, the case stayed cold. Until something hidden was discovered that forced everyone to remember what they tried to forget. Welcome to Minority Struggles. Wherever you're listening, this is where unheard stories are being told. Before I begin, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what times and where you're tuning in from. It means everything to know we're telling these stories together. Now, let me tell you what really happened. Let's begin. It was supposed to be the happiest night of her life. April 28th, 2001. The sun was out that morning in Gray Ridge, Georgia, a quiet town where prom season meant corsages, borrowed limos, and hopes stitched into silk. 17-year-old Tamara Fields left school early that Friday, a hall pass in her hand and a quiet smile on her face. She told her homeroom teacher she needed to go home and finish getting ready. Her dress was almost done. She'd made it herself, sky blue, sleeveless, with a modest V-cut and satin ruffle at the hem. Every seam sewn by hand. The last thing she said before stepping out of the building was, "I can't be late tonight." But she never made it. By 6 p.m., Tamara hadn't called. She always checked in. Her mother, Lorraine Fields, had the house cleaned, a roast warming in the oven, and a disposable camera waiting to capture her only child's big night. She paced near the phone. Then she called Tamara's best friend. No answer. By 7 o'clock, she called the school. They said Tamara never arrived. By 8:30, Lorraine was knocking on every door in their block. By 10:15, she was standing in front of a police officer at Gray Ridge PD with trembling hands. "She's missing," she said. "She's not the type to run off." The officer barely looked up. "She's 17, ma'am. Sometimes girls just need a night away." "She's never done this before," Lorraine said, tears already falling. "She's got a dress hanging in the hallway. She ironed it this morning. She was excited. Please." The officer wrote down her information. He promised to make a note, maybe send a car around. But there was no urgency, no broadcast, no call to the media, and no Amber Alert. Lorraine stayed up that night, sitting on the porch, wrapped in Tamara's prom shawl. The sun came up without her daughter. There would be no pictures, no closure, just silence. 20 years later, the sky over Gray Ridge looked exactly the same. Sunlight filtered through the same dogwood trees, hot wind blowing dust through the back lots of what used to be downtown. But the town had changed. Businesses had dried up. Schools consolidated. The Glen Rose Motel stood at the edge of town like a broken tooth. It had been shuttered since 2008. Locals said it should have been torn down years ago, but no one wanted to spend the money. Until now, the bulldozers arrived just after sunrise. The Glen Rose was finally being demolished. Half the town drove by to watch from their cars, slow like a funeral procession. By noon, most of the outer shell had been ripped away, doors hanging, insulation flapping, walls cracked open like bones. It was Curtis Dane, the janitor hired to sweep the demo site, who found it. Room 6 had always felt off, he later told a reporter. It smelled strange even after all these years. While clearing debris from a bathroom, Curtis noticed something soft wedged inside a drywall cavity, hidden behind old plasterboard and a false utility panel. He reached in, pulled, and stumbled backward in horror. It was a dress, a sky blue dress, torn at the shoulder, dust-stained, a faded grease blotch near the hip. Fabric once smooth, now rumpled like it had been crumpled in a fist. No tag inside, just a stitched label that read T. Fields. The police arrived 2 hours later. Crime scene tape was wrapped around the shell of room 6. Curtis sat on the curb, pale and shaking. "I didn't know," he kept saying. "I didn't know what it was. I just pulled something out of the wall." The news spread like wildfire. Back at her home on Willow Street, Lorraine Fields got the call she never expected, and somehow always feared. A reporter from Channel 4 asked if she could confirm her daughter's full name, that a dress matching Tamara's had been recovered. Lorraine hung up mid-sentence. She didn't cry right away. She just walked to Tamara's bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the twin dress pattern, an old paper sheet her daughter had used to guide the design. The same cut, the same hem. She sat on the bed and whispered, "You finished it. You wore it." and they stuffed it in a wall. That night, Rochelle Benton arrived back in Grey Ridge for the first time in nearly 10 years. She was a reporter now, had moved to Atlanta, gotten byline credits, covered missing persons before. But this one was different. Tamara was her classmate. Quiet girl, good at art. She remembered the drawing Tamara made of their senior class, how she'd handed it to the teacher with shy pride. Rochelle remembered, too, that Tamara wasn't the kind of girl who vanished. Back then, it was easier for people to say she ran away, that she probably got pregnant or caught a bus somewhere. There were no posters, no school assembly, no prayer vigil, just silence. Now, 20 years later, the town couldn't stay quiet anymore. Rochelle drove past the old Glenrose. Flashing lights lit up the shell of room 6. An officer carried out a pink handbag in an evidence bag. Reporters whispered that a purse had been found near the dress, zipped and still intact. In the police station, a newly assigned cold case unit reviewed the file. A junior detective looked up from the records and asked, "Why wasn't there an Amber Alert?" A senior officer shook his head slowly. 2001. It wasn't national yet, and she was 17. Not technically a child, but still. She was black, the officer said quietly. You know how that went back then? Rochelle watched as the dress was tagged and boxed. A memory surfaced. Tamara, walking down the hallway in early April, carrying a roll of satin fabric and smiling to herself. Rochelle whispered under her breath, "You really made it. You really wore it." But no one had ever seen her in it. Not until now. The photo hit the news by morning. Sky blue, dusty, torn at the strap, crumpled like someone had tried to make it disappear. But Lorraine Fields didn't need a press conference. She didn't need a lab report. The moment she saw the dress on TV, sealed in a clear plastic evidence bag, her body reacted before her brain caught up. Her knees gave out. She dropped her teacup on the floor. Shards scattered across the kitchen tiles like a scream frozen in glass. She didn't cry. Not at first. Just stared at the screen. "That's her dress," she said out loud. "That's my baby's dress." Later that morning, Rochelle Benton arrived at Lorraine's porch with a notebook in her hand and questions she already knew would hurt to ask. She didn't expect the door to open right away, but it did. Lorraine stood there, eyes hollow, robe tied tightly, as if she'd been waiting for this for 20 years. "You want to ask me what I think happened to my daughter?" Lorraine said, her voice dry. "The truth is, I don't know. All I know is she made that dress. Every stitch. I was there for every pin she pulled." "Can I come in?" Rochelle asked gently. The house hadn't changed much. Floral sofa, doilies on the side tables. A photo of Tamara at age 10 on the mantel, smiling wide with a missing front tooth. Rochelle took a seat across from Lorraine, who held a throw pillow tightly in her lap like a shield. "Do you remember anything strange in the days before she went missing?" Rochelle asked. "Anyone new in her life? Anything she said?" Lorraine hesitated. Her gaze wandered to the framed class photo on the wall. Tamara was in the third row, smiling with her head slightly tilted. "She said something, maybe a week before it happened," Lorraine whispered. "She told me she felt like someone was watching her." Rochelle sat up straighter. "Where?" "Walking home. At the corner store. She said she couldn't shake it." Lorraine swallowed hard. "I told her it was because she's a beautiful girl. I said sometimes men stare. I thought it was just boys being boys." She turned to face Rochelle then, eyes filling. "She was trying to tell me, and I told her to ignore it." Rochelle didn't speak. She just let the silence hang, let the weight of it settle in the room. "She was working on the dress all month," Lorraine said. "Wouldn't let me help. Said she wanted to wear something nobody else would ever have. I still have the pattern. May I see it?" Lorraine nodded and disappeared down the hallway. A moment later, she returned with a long cardboard envelope. Inside was a wrinkled sheet of tissue paper with blue chalk marks. On the top corner, Butterick pattern B612, but with handwritten changes. Custom sleeves. Modified hem. Tamara's work. Rochelle gently traced the shoulder line, the same place the strap had torn. At the station, Detective Riddell stood over the evidence table, staring at the contents of Tamara's pink purse. The bag had been zipped. Inside were a few coins, a broken lipstick, a compact mirror with a crack across it, and one folded piece of paper, a flyer. He held it up carefully. Black ink. Dot matrix print. Words slightly smudged. Casting call. Models wanted. Atlanta-style showcase. One day only. Saturday, April 28th, 2001, Glen Rose Motel. Room 8. Bring portfolio or recent photo. Riddell swore under his breath. The paper was old, but real. Not a copy. It had been folded and carried. Where the hell did this come from? He muttered. Who gave this to her? Down at the records archive, Rochelle dug through old incident reports from the Glen Rose Motel between 1998 and 2005. Fights, drugs, a few assaults. Nothing that ever made headlines. No murder. No missing persons connected to that address. But then she found a single call made on April 29th, 2001, early Sunday morning. A woman staying in room 10 had called to report strange sounds coming from the next room. Banging. A man's voice. Something breaking. The officer who responded wrote, Room 6 was unoccupied. No signs of disturbance. Caller likely mistaken or intoxicated. Rochelle circled the report and took a photo. She remembered room 6. That's where the dress was found. Back at her hotel, she called her old contact in Atlanta, a retired FBI analyst named Gerald Knox. He picked up on the second ring. Knox, he said. It's Rochelle Benton. I'm working a case from back home. A missing girl from 2001, Tamara Fields. You got a body? No, but they found her dress. In a motel wall. 20 years later. A pause. Then Knox's voice lowered. Was she black? Yes. Knox sighed. Let me guess. No Amber Alert. Cops said she ran away. Rochelle didn't answer. She didn't have to. I kept a list, he said. Unofficial. Between 1998 and 2004, there were 17 missing black girls across the South, ages 14 to 19, all labeled runaways. No alerts. Most vanished near motels, gas stations, or bus stops. Rochelle's skin prickled. Did they ever find any of them? 2 bodies. 15 still missing. He paused again. You think your girl was one of them? I think someone wanted her gone. As night fell, Lorraine sat alone in Tamara's room, holding a prom shoe in her hand. Her daughter had tried it on the night before she vanished. Lorraine remembered watching her twirl in the living room, barefoot, giggling, saying, Mama, this is my princess moment. She remembered how beautiful she looked, and how she never got to wear the other shoe. The next morning, Rochelle found herself staring at a yearbook. It wasn't hers. It was a donated copy she'd pulled from the local library archive. Gray Ridge High, class of 2001. She turned the pages slowly until she got to the faculty section. Most faces were familiar. Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Alston, Principal Dorsey. But then her finger stopped on a man she barely remembered. Reggie Clay, substitute teacher, spring term only. There was no quote under his photo. No club association. Just a blank look and a dated beige tie. She shut the yearbook fast. Clay. The name had come up just last week in an unrelated news story. Rochelle pulled it up on her phone. Councilman Reggie Clay, now 59, had been pushing through local redevelopment projects, including the demolition of the Glen Rose Motel. He'd been the one to call the Glen Rose an eyesore, a relic of crime, and a barrier to community progress. He was also the one who insisted the demolition begin immediately, skipping historical inspection protocols. By noon, Rochelle was standing outside City Hall. Clay's office was on the 3rd floor. She had no appointment, but she didn't need one. His assistant looked surprised to see her. He's in a meeting, she said. Rochelle didn't blink. I'll wait. 15 minutes later, the door opened, and Councilman Clay stepped into the hallway. His expression barely shifted when he saw her. Ms. Benton, right? He said smoothly. Reporter out of Atlanta? Used to be, Rochelle replied. I'm home now, covering the Glen Rose. Clay motioned to his office. You want a quote? Actually, I want to talk about a girl. Tamara Fields. Something flickered across his face. Not surprise. Not guilt. Just recognition. I'm not sure I remember the name, he said, sitting behind his desk. She went missing in 2001. She was in your homeroom for a few weeks. Spring term. That was a long time ago. She was 17. Black. Disappeared on prom night. Her dress was just found stuffed in the wall of the Glenrose. You pushed for that demolition. Clay's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you suggesting I had something to do with her disappearance? I'm suggesting it's strange that you worked at her school for one semester and left right after she vanished. Then, 20 years later, you bulldozed the place her dress was found without any structural check. Clay leaned back. Do you have a warrant, Ms. Benton? I'm not a cop. I'm just someone who remembers her. He stood. This conversation is over. Rochelle didn't argue. She just nodded and walked out, but her recorder was still running in her pocket. She didn't need a confession. She just needed enough smoke to find the fire. Back at the precinct, Riddell was going through Tamara's old case file. It was thinner than it should have been. Just a few handwritten reports, a school attendance record, and a single missing persons form filled out by Lorraine Fields. The tip line sheet caught his eye. It was dated May 1st, 2001. A call came in from a woman who claimed to have seen Tamara the day she went missing, standing near the Glenrose Motel, speaking to a man in a dark sedan. The officer's note was quick and dismissive. Caller sounded hysterical, possibly intoxicated. Tip not followed up. Riddell cursed under his breath. He remembered that call. He was the one who dismissed it. At the time, there were dozens of tips. Most turned up nothing. But this one had specifics: car color, license plate partial, time of day. He remembered thinking, it's not enough. She probably ran off anyway. And so, he let it go. Now, 20 years later, the weight of it crushed his chest. He called Rochelle immediately. Whoever gave her that casting call flyer didn't make just one, he said. You need to look into any other girls who got the same pitch. I already am, she replied. That night, Rochelle opened an old manila envelope on her motel bed. Inside were printouts from the FBI's unofficial missing persons list, the one Gerald Knox had kept privately, off the record. She started lining up the cases. 1999, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Iona Green, 16. Disappeared outside a gas station. Last seen near a budget motel. 2000, Meridian, Mississippi. Jasmine Lowe, 17. Went missing after attending a local job fair. 2001, Gray Ridge, Georgia. Tamara Fields. Left school to prepare for prom. Dress later found in wall. Each case had three things in common. The victim was a teenage black girl. The last known location was near a motel, and there was never an Amber Alert issued. Each was dismissed as a likely runaway. Rochelle stared at the pattern. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been preying on girls who wouldn't be searched for, who wouldn't be headline news, who'd be forgotten before the ink dried. She zoomed in on an old article clipping from 1999. A local substitute teacher in Mississippi was investigated after a student reported being followed to her bus stop. The case was closed with insufficient evidence. The teacher's name? Reggie Clay. The breath left her body. At Lorraine's house, the phone rang again. It had rung off and on for the past 2 days. Media, police, neighbors offering empty condolences. Lorraine let most of them go to voicemail. But this one she answered. Mrs. Fields, the detective on the line, said, "We have a question." "What is it?" "Did Tamara ever mention someone offering her a job? A modeling opportunity?" Lorraine was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "She told me a man at school said she had the look for fashion. Said he knew someone in Atlanta. I thought it was just flattery. I didn't think." Her voice broke. The silence that followed said everything she couldn't. In her lap sat Tamara's old compact mirror, still cracked down the middle. She kept it like a relic. The last thing her daughter touched. The last thing she may have seen herself in. And now it reflected only grief. Forensics arrived in unmarked vans 3 days after the dress was found. They didn't wear uniforms. Just latex gloves, layered jackets, and grim expressions that said this wasn't their first wall with secrets inside. Room 6 of the Glenrose Motel was already stripped down to its studs. The drywall had been peeled back where the prom dress had been stuffed. It was a narrow cavity between 2 frame posts, barely wide enough for a backpack. The team carefully scanned the cavity, inch by inch. There was no blood, no trace of decomposition, no fingernails, no skin, just hairline scratches along the interior surface of the drywall, scattered, disorganized, shallow. Initially, one technician said, could be human-made. Panic marks. But later, Under UV light, they saw uniform depth. No DNA. No oils. Not fingernails, she said. These were made by a tool. And the cavity? Empty. Sterile. Dry. Tamara's body had never been there. Only her dress. Her purse. Her shame. Detective Marcus Riddell stood beside the scene with arms crossed. The evidence told a new story. Someone had staged the hiding, sealed it like trash in a wall cavity, then painted it over and left it for time to swallow. He pulled the old Glen Rose maintenance logs. Most were water-damaged or missing. But one handwritten invoice remained, dated September 2004, drywall replacement, room 6, minor plumbing leak. That's when the wall had been resealed. 3 years after Tamara disappeared. Whoever hid the dress came back later, maybe to move a body, maybe to erase what little remained. At the precinct, Rochelle spread her notes across a long desk. Photos, names, newspaper clippings, a map with pins and red thread that felt more like obsession than journalism. 17 girls, all black, all gone between 1998 and 2004. Most of them teens. Most from towns no one could point on a map. She highlighted every detail that matched Tamara's case. Motel, bus station, no Amber Alert, assumed runaway, lack of follow-up. Then she underlined one name again, Reggie Clay. He'd worked in 3 of those towns, all as a temporary educator, substituting, mentoring, even offering career workshops for disadvantaged students. There was no criminal record, no charges, just whisper trails and coincidences. Rochelle requested a copy of Clay's personnel file from Grey Ridge High. She received a thin folder. Inside was his job application, a short background check, and a performance review. The review said he was friendly, respected by staff, particularly the girls. That last sentence made her skin crawl. Then she noticed something odd. A post-it note stuck to the back of the file. It wasn't official. It looked like it had been added after the fact. Complaint dismissed. Inappropriate comment. Tamara F. No form. No signature. No follow-up. It was the only time Tamara's name appeared in his file. Rochelle called the school district. The secretary couldn't find any record of the complaint. Maybe it was verbal, the woman said. Back then, we didn't always document things unless it got serious. It was serious, Rochelle replied and hung up. Later that day, the forensics team completed their scan of the dress and purse. The dress fibers revealed particles of motor oil, concrete dust, and red clay soil. No blood, no bone fragments, but evidence of exposure to industrial flooring. The purse still contained Tamara's lipstick, mirror, and a wallet with $3. No credit cards, no phone, just a crumpled receipt from a gas station dated April 28, 2001. 3:24 p.m. Tamara was last seen leaving school at 3 o'clock. The station was 2 blocks from the Glen Rose Motel. Riddell drove there himself. The store had changed hands 3 times. No security footage existed, but an old employee, now managing the place, remembered something strange. I was a clerk back then, he said. Prom day, yeah, busy as hell. But I do remember a girl in a light blue dress. Looked nervous. Said she was meeting someone across the street. Did she say who? The man shook his head. No, but there was a black car parked outside for a while. Didn't buy anything. Just waited. What kind of car? Old sedan. Tinted windows. Maybe a Buick or Lincoln. It matched the tip Riddell had ignored 20 years ago. He wrote it down again, firmer this time. Back at Lorraine's house, Rochelle came to visit again. This time, she brought the flyer. The one found in Tamara's purse, the casting call ad printed on cheap paper. Lorraine stared at it for a long time. I didn't see this before, she said. But she told me about a man. Said he was nice. Said he thought she could model. Did she say where she met him? At school. Said he was helping with a career day thing. Rochelle gently asked, was it Mr. Clay? Lorraine didn't answer at first. Then she nodded slowly. She said he gave her his number, told her not to tell anyone because other girls might get jealous. I told her to be careful, but she seemed excited. Rochelle didn't press. She didn't need to. She already knew what this was. It wasn't just neglect. It was grooming. Tamara had been marked, chosen, and then erased. The next morning, Rochelle received an email from the state cold case unit. The wall cavity behind room 6 showed signs of manual sealing with plaster and caulk, materials not used by the motel during their regular repairs. It was sealed from the inside, but resealed more professionally later. The timeline aligned with Curtis Dane's employment history. Curtis, the janitor who discovered the dress, who had worked at the Glenrose from 1999 to 2005, who now wasn't returning calls. Riddell issued a request to bring Curtis in for questioning. But Curtis was gone, didn't show up for work, didn't go home. His mailbox was full. His trailer sat still under the pines like a mouth holding breath. Inside, Rochelle found a single photograph on the wall, yellowed, curling at the edges. It showed Curtis younger, smiling in front of room 6. In the corner of the frame, blurred but unmistakable, was a blue blur of satin, and a girl stepping into the shadows. The first thing they noticed was the silence. Curtis Dane didn't clock in for his shift the next morning. No one had heard from him. His truck was gone, and his trailer was dark. The wind chimes outside his door jingled softly, but nothing else stirred. He didn't answer calls, didn't return texts. By midday, the police officially labeled him missing. Detective Riddell issued a bolo for Curtis Dane across Georgia and bordering states. His photo, his license plate, and a briefcase summary were uploaded into the national database. The FBI's Missing Persons Task Force added him to their Persons of Interest watch list. But by the time they made it inside his trailer, it was already too late. The door wasn't locked, just gently latched, like someone expected to return. The blinds were closed. The air inside was stale, untouched. Dishes in the sink. A pair of muddy boots by the door. And on the coffee table, beneath a layer of dust, a sealed plastic bag. Inside, a cracked student ID card with a blurry photo and the name T. Fields. Riddell stared at it without blinking. It was hers. Tamara's student ID, reported missing from her locker, never recovered. And that wasn't all. In Curtis's bedroom closet, investigators found a shoebox. Taped shut. Inside were items that no one had reported stolen because no one knew they were missing. A silver charm bracelet, a pink hair clip, an old bus pass, a ring with the name Ayana engraved on the inside band. Each one was photographed and tagged. Rochelle stood beside the evidence board as they laid the items out in rows. One of the techs whispered, "These don't belong to just one girl. There were too many names, too many memories locked in plastic." They found a notebook under Curtis's mattress, spiral-bound, worn, filled with scribbled numbers and place names. Each line listed a motel, a date, and a set of initials. One page read, Glenrose, April 28th, 01 TF. Cedar Inn, June 14th, 99 G. Red Pine Lodge, February 11th, 03 JL. 17 entries. 17 sets of initials. Rochelle knew what they meant. The task force reviewed Curtis's employment history. He'd worked as a janitor, night cleaner, handyman, all at motels and bus stations across the Deep South. His resume was fragmented. He never stayed in one place too long. He had no criminal record, no children, no marriage, just a string of pay stubs and silence. When the news broke, Grey Ridge panicked. Curtis had always been quiet, but no one thought him dangerous. Odd, not evil, one neighbor said. Kept to himself, but polite. Now he was the man who found the dress, and the man who ran. Police combed through his last known activity. His bank account hadn't been touched. No flight purchases. No fuel charges. It was like he had vanished on foot, or been helped by someone else. Riddell stood at the center of it all, back in room 6 of the now demolished Glenrose. The empty foundation glared under the afternoon sun. A patch of yellow crime scene tape fluttered against the chain-link fence. "I think he saw something," he muttered, "and I think he held on to it because no one would believe him." What if he wasn't just holding it? Rochelle asked. What if he was told to hide it? Riddell looked at her. "Are you saying someone paid him?" "I'm saying someone scared him." That night, Rochelle received a package at her motel. No return address. No postmark. Inside, a burnt photograph. Edges curled, center slightly faded. It showed a young girl in a blue dress standing near the back lot of the Glenrose Motel. Her eyes were down. Her hands were folded. She looked waiting. In the background, barely visible, was a man standing in shadow. She turned the photo over. Written in shaky ink were the words, "I didn't know until it was too late." She brought the photo to the task force. The image was dated by photo paper, late 90s, early 2000s. Forensics couldn't lift any prints. The handwriting didn't match Curtis's notebook, but they believed he sent it. Maybe the last thing he did before disappearing. By week's end, Reggie Clay finally responded to press inquiries. At a staged news conference, he wore a navy suit and a somber expression. He called Tamara's case a tragedy and urged the town to let law enforcement do their job. Rochelle asked him directly, "Did you know Curtis Dane?" Clay hesitated only slightly. "I may have seen him in passing. He worked in sanitation. We didn't cross paths. Did you ever speak to Tamara Fields?" He stared at her. "Not directly. I taught dozens of students. I have testimony that you offered her a modeling opportunity." Clay's jaw clenched. "That's ridiculous." Rochelle held up the casting flyer. She had this in her purse, printed with the Glenrose address. Clay didn't answer. His aide stepped in to end the press conference. Later, the councilman's office released a statement. "These accusations are baseless, politically motivated, and insensitive to a grieving family." But behind closed doors, the district attorney's office quietly reopened his 1999 case file for Mississippi. It wouldn't lead to charges. There was no smoking gun, no living witness, and still no body. But something was changing. Lorraine heard about Curtis's disappearance from a nurse. She had been resting. The stress of the past week had worn her thin. Her blood pressure had spiked. She hadn't eaten, hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. She was admitted to the hospital that evening with fatigue and arrhythmia. The doctor said she'd pushed herself too long. When Rochelle visited her there, Lorraine turned her face to the window. "He knew something," she whispered. "And now he's gone too." "I think he wanted to tell the truth," Rochelle said. "He waited too long," Lorraine murmured. Rochelle reached in her bag and handed Lorraine a small envelope. Inside, a photo of Tamara's prom dress, gently repressed and clean, taken during forensic analysis. Lorraine traced the torn strap with her fingertip. "She still looked beautiful," she said, "even after what they did." She closed her eyes. The nurses let her sleep. Outside, Rochelle walked to her car. The wind had picked up. Dust swirled in the parking lot. She looked up at the fading sunset and thought, "We're running out of people to ask. And still, Tamara is nowhere to be found." They demolished what was left of the Glenrose Motel that Monday. The last of the foundation was torn out and buried beneath layers of gravel and concrete. Dust clouded the air as trucks rolled in and out of the lot. There was no ceremony, no final photograph. Just silence and a chain-link fence around a space that once held secrets. Lorraine Fields watched from across the street, seated in a lawn chair her neighbor had brought for her. She was thinner now, paler. Her shoulders curved in like something had caved inside her. In her lap sat a plastic grocery bag. Inside were Tamara's old prom shoes, soft blue satin, one of them still with the sticker on the sole. She didn't speak as the machines roared, didn't flinch when the final wall came down, just held the shoes like they were bones, like they were her daughter's hands. Rochelle stood beside her. "They said the site will be turned into a pharmacy," she said quietly. Lorraine gave a soft, humorless laugh. "A pharmacy? Imagine that." She didn't look away from the dust cloud. "That motel sat there for 20 years, she said, rotting, and it took them that long to care. And only after my baby's dress came out of its walls." Later that week, Rochelle sat in a conference room with the state cold case unit and FBI liaison Gerald Knox. The investigation into Tamara Fields' disappearance, now reclassified as a likely homicide, remained active but stagnant. Curtis Dane was still missing. His truck had been spotted on a trail camera 2 counties north, but search dogs lost the scent in the woods. They assumed he was either dead or hiding. The evidence in his trailer, the notebook, the bracelet, the ID, was enough to label him a person of interest, but not enough to charge anyone. Reggie Clay had officially stepped down from city council. He cited health issues, though insiders claimed the pressure from the reopened investigations was the true cause. Old complaints from his time as a teacher were pulled from school district archives. But there was no confession, no DNA, no eyewitnesses. Without Tamara's body, the DA refused to move forward. Rochelle asked the question everyone else was afraid to say aloud. What if we never find her? Knox didn't blink. Then we tell the truth. Loudly. Until people have to hear it. She nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. That evening, Rochelle published her final article. The headline read, "She never made it to prom, but she was never gone." The story went viral within hours. People shared Tamara's photo, her dress, her mother's quote. News outlets picked up the story nationwide. It was covered on podcasts, true crime panels, and television specials. For a brief moment, Tamara Fields was no longer just a name in a file. She was a daughter, a seamstress, a girl who had planned every thread of her future until someone took it away. But even with all the attention, there were no new leads. No anonymous confessions. Just quiet. At the hospital, Lorraine's condition worsened. Stress had hardened into fatigue. Her blood pressure fluctuated daily. The nurses brought her soft food and dimmed the lights when she asked. Sometimes she spoke. Sometimes she didn't. One morning, Rochelle brought her a printed copy of the article. She read it aloud, slowly, word by word. Lorraine closed her eyes. When Rochelle reached the final paragraph, Lorraine reached for her hand. She didn't get to graduate, she said. She didn't get to marry or have kids. She didn't even get to dance that night. But now people know her name. Rochelle nodded. They do. She mattered. She always did. The next day, Rochelle visited the empty lot one last time. The soil had been flattened. Grass seed scattered. A few scraps of brick and metal still poked through the dirt. She placed a single photo on the chain-link fence. Tamara, age 17, holding the unfinished hem of her dress in the living room. Smiling. Below it, Rochelle pinned a small white sign. Missing but never lost. She didn't stay long. That night, the wind picked up across Gray Ridge. Rain whispered against rooftops. Somewhere in the woods, a fox howled. Somewhere on a dusty trail, a truck rusted into silence. And somewhere in thousands of hearts, Tamara Fields lived. She lived in every missing daughter not searched for. Every case labeled runaway because she didn't fit the headlines. Every mother who screamed into empty phones and was told to wait. She lived in the silence. She lived in the scream that finally broke through. And in the end, there was no justice, no body, no closure, just one truth buried deeper than any wall could hold. Justice doesn't disappear. It gets ignored. And sometimes, there was a blue dress no one saw until it was already too late.